Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. I'm Jenny and this is my reading wrap-up for January of 2024. The first book that I finished was The Lewis Man by Peter May. This is a mystery crime, I wouldn't say really necessarily a thriller, mystery crime series, and it is set on the Isle of Lewis in the Hebrides Islands off of Scotland. This is the second in a trilogy. And I read the first one 2 years ago, I think. So I really enjoyed this one. I enjoyed the first one, The Black House, and I enjoyed it enough to keep going in the series. But this one was just really well crafted. Creating this revealing the story step by step, because our main protagonist that the story, or our main subject that the story rotates around, has dementia, and so his recollections and the way he sees the world, I thought were relayed in a very empathetic and kind way, but they obviously are not linear and they don't necessarily reveal things the same way it would if someone was telling the story and was not suffering from dementia. So it really weaves the story around and you're not sure what's happening or what's going on. As often happens with these types of stories for me, I find them that they end too abruptly. So that's the only thing that I find frustrating about these types of stories, is that the endings are just bang, and then you kind of want a little bit more of a resolution. I don't know if this is because this is book 2 and book 3 is where things have more of a happy finish, but anyway, that's my only problem with this story, was that I thought that the last 7 chapters felt very rushed, and I prefer something to, just add those 20, to 30 more pages, just to give it a nice little satisfying ending. So that is it for The Lewis Man, and I will check in again with you when I have finished another book. Hey everyone. So I've just finished my second book of January, The Diver's Clothes Lie Empty by Vendela, Vida. And this was really interesting. I'm not sure. It's a very different book, not something that's very typical. The story is told in the second person, which is always a bit disconcerting for me, but fine. There's no chapter breaks, so I do also find a book with no chapter breaks to be sometimes challenging, but it also kind of goes with the story. So our main character, whose actual name I don't think we ever really hear, she is traveling to Morocco, and she has her bag with all of her identification and money stolen almost as soon as she arrives. And from there, she goes through this crisis of identity. And it's because she's had a traumatic experience where she's come from in the United States, and she's from Florida. And so she has a level of paranoia. She has a level of disassociation from who she actually is, her body and everything. And so she goes through these series of kind of serendipitous events where she just kind of jumps into a situation and takes advantage of it, but is always suspicious and guarded because she doesn't want anyone to know who she actually is or what's actually happened to her, because it's so painful and she's kind of just running from it. And so you learn a lot about Casablanca. It's mostly about Casablanca and Moroccan culture, but there's also kind of otherworldly aspect to it, because she gets involved with a film that's being filmed in Casablanca and a famous American actress. And so this is about identity. It's about the fluidity of identity. I don't know if it's actually, I don't think it's really necessarily realistic or trying to be realistic. It is rather unsettling because you want to know what happens and you don't fully understand why she's so reluctant to just be who she is. And even when you learn about the trauma that's happened to her, the motivation for the disassociation from her life feels a little bit much to me. But I wouldn't say I loved this, but I do think it was well conceived and an interesting journey to go on. And I guess one of the things that the lack of chapter breaks made is that this isn't a very long book. And so it feels like just one run on. It's 213 pages. So you just kind of read it quite quickly. It's a very quick read. I could see someone reading this in one sitting. If you want to just have like kind of an adventure story, then I think, it would be a good one sitting read. So that is The Diver's Clothes Lie Empty by Vendela Vida. And I will check in with you again when I have finished another book. Hey everybody. So I finished 2 books this week and I wanted to wrap them for you. The first one is the poetry collection Wayside Sang by Cecily Nicholson. These poems covered, I don't know. I wasn't super absorbed by the poems. Some of them I liked better than others. I think the middle section, which was Road Shoulders, was the one that I liked the best. And then there were a few times where she included a quote with the poems, which I liked. I always enjoy people that, like writers that put quotes in novels or in poetry. I think they work really well to kind of help you to orient the tone and where the poet is going. I liked the poems well enough, or was curious enough about them to keep reading them. Most of them, there were some sections where I just didn't keep going. The poems didn't have titles. I find that a little bit disconcerting because I'm not sure when poems don't have titles to me or anything to kind of divide them, it just feels like they should continuously go into each other. And I prefer there to be a bit more differentiation between them. So that's Wayside Sang. And then I finished my audiobook, which was The Painted Girls by Cathy Marie Buchanan. And this one I really enjoyed. So it's narrated by 3 different narrators because the story itself is kind of divided into 3 perspectives. You have Antoinette, the oldest sister, Marie, who's the middle sister, and they're the 2 perspectives that you hear from. And then you have the 3rd narrator was a male voice, and he was doing all of the newspaper articles, all of the kind of like updates, mixed media updates that were included in the text. So I think there were some poems and some sayings that were included here and there, and then some newspaper articles from a fictitious article. So the afterword of the story was quite interesting because this is a historical novel, but is based on real people. So Antoinette, Marie, and their younger sister Charlotte Van Gerten were all real women who lived in Paris during the Belle Epoque. So this is 1880 1880 to 1881, I think this takes place over. And then afterward in 1895. So we follow the sisters over about a 2-year period, I think. And Antoinette is the oldest. She is 19 or 18. And then you have Marie, who starts off, she's 14. And then Charlotte, who's like 10. They live with their mother. Their father has passed away. Their mother is a laundress addicted to absinthe. The two younger girls are going to go work for the Paris Opera because they have dancers who perform, and it is a way for the girls to earn money that they can then help support the family with. Antoinette did do that, but she was too headstrong and was kicked out. So what I liked about this story was that it exposed me to a whole bunch of perspectives and ideas and parts of history that I didn't know. So the little girls who dance are called the petite rats, the little rats, and they are trained there. A lot of them are, some of them are middle class, some of them are working class and poor. It is a way for them to earn money. And there is also an underbelly of this whole world where rich patrons, rich men, essentially will sponsor these younger girls and help them to become ballerinas in exchange for their company under oftentimes nefarious circumstances. So the girls are escorts to these men, and the men are obviously what we would deem today as pedophiles or gross old men who want to be around young women and be with them sexually if they can. And this is the world that Marie is brought into. She wants to dance. She is also very intelligent and was going to the convent to learn to read. It's a novel that is very wrapped up in the lives of women, from working class, like poor and working class women, what they have to do, what they have to endure, the way men treat them, the way they go from, innocent young girls to, like cynical, worn out women who can't, they have no agency. The only thing they have to use is their bodies to make money. And it's, the jobs they had as laundresses or these little jobs where they're making hardly any money, not enough to survive. And then you see the courtesan, or the coquettes as they're called. So the prostitutes the sex workers who were able to make more money because they were, doing something that was more lucrative at the time. So one of the daughters, Marie, becomes the model for Edouard Degas' The Little Dancer statue, which is a very famous art piece now. Now it is 28 bronzes that are all over the world, but at the time that Degas was alive, he didn't have it made into bronzes. He just had it as a little maquette, or a little statue. And Marie was the model for that, and she was the actual model for that. And people said horrible things about the way she looked, and her. At that time, they were also talking about people's looks in relation to their evolutionary history. So it was kind of that whole like pseudoscience mess where people were, the measurements of their foreheads and things were used as these ways of trying to dictate their intelligence, which is terrible. And the story is crafted as well by tying in two three men actually, who committed some crimes, and tying them into Antoinette's story. And so you also get to see like the kind of underbelly, the prison system, the kind of darker parts of Paris. So I thought it was like a very interesting perspective to come from. Again, I really like those types of books that shift you out of the kind of typical viewpoints of these periods where you're not really being exposed to like everyone's experience, but only like the fancy people or the rich people. Like you're really getting to see multiple layers here of existence. So I really enjoyed it. I thought the relationship between the sisters, especially Antoinette and Marie, was very deep. It was very fraught. It was fraught because of the circumstances under which they were living, but also because of the differences in their personalities. But I thought that that it was handled really well, and I was very engaged in their relationship and wanted them to make it through the conflicts that they encountered. And I thought it was a really interesting novel, and it has a lot to offer if you're interested in the lives of women at different periods of time in history. So there you go. That is The Painted Girls. Hey everyone. So I finished The Betrayal by Helen Dunmore last night. And I thought this was a very, very well done novel. It certainly has a very bittersweet ending, and it reveals the absolute, what is the word I'm looking for? Twisted and overwhelming life living in a country that is ruled, or that is, basically dictated to by a tyrant that was Stalin, and the way that he kept people in this perpetual state of fear and disconnect, because you could never trust your community, because your community could constantly betray you and turn you in so that they could gain something somehow. And this novel is really about that twisted nature, how something so innocent could be twisted, and it didn't matter whether or not you were innocent, because you would be tortured, you would be killed, you would be removed from your life for no cause whatsoever, and have no recourse to get your life back. So there's so much in here. There's so many layers to the story, because we follow a higher up in the MGB, and we also, like, lightly, he's kind of in the story, but there's at the end, the last chapter, Helen Dunmore talks about March 1953, following the death of Stalin, and then how this specific campaign was all about targeting doctors and making doctors, like, saying that doctors were had a conspiracy to kill higher ups in the government. I mean, it was ludicrous at the time, but it was, this paranoia and fear and like lashing out at people really affected so many people's lives and kept people from living happy lives. And that was certainly the case here. And so I do recommend both The Siege and The Betrayal if you're interested in the history of Russia, and in Leningrad specifically, and also in the claustrophobic feeling of living in a society such as this, where you really can't trust anyone except your most close loves. And even then, like, having to do things like denounce each other to protect your family is just, the idea of it is very difficult for someone who's grown up in a Western democracy. Not saying that Western democracies are perfect by any means, but just saying that there's a lot more freedom of thought and trust in systems than in other places. So That is The Betrayal by Helene Dunmore. Hey everyone, please ignore the stuff behind me. Okay, so I have my last finish of January to share with you. And it is The Best Rock by Evie Wyld. And I think I might struggle to talk about this book, so please bear with me. I heard about this book when it came out. It got a lot of hype on BookTube. And I think that it also won the Stella Prize in 2019, I believe, which is one of the top Australian literary prizes for women's writing, I believe. Oh, maybe it won it in 2021. Anyway, this says it was published in 2020. So I don't know if I didn't actually listen to what this book was about, or if I think sometimes when you hear a book, the hype of a book, and you put it on your TBR, you promptly, I don't think I kept hearing about it. I heard about it, and then it went into my periphery. I got this for my birthday a couple of years ago. So I read it, added it to my TBR in January because I had gotten through the other books that I had put on there. Now, this book has three perspectives, but the thing is, it has a lot of vignettes in between those three perspectives. We have Sarah, who's apparently from the 1700s. I couldn't find anywhere in here where that is referenced at all, so I just assumed it was, sometime pre-20th century, but I didn't think it was obvious when this was. But everyone else I've heard review this book have said 1700s, so perhaps there's something I missed. Obviously, there's a witch kind of scare, so I guess maybe that's the way they were putting it in. So the 1700s, the witch trials, like a time when there was hysteria around witches, but I really feel like that could extend into the 1800s. It's still something that's prevalent in culture even today, the kind of fear of witches. So that automatically made me want to read it. I'm really interested in histories of witchcraft, in all those types of things. You have a second perspective from Ruth, set post World War II, and set, I would say it is the main anchor of the story. Ruth's story is the main anchor of the story. And then you have Vivian, who is a modern day pseudo-descendant of Ruth, so connected to Ruth through family ties, who is going back to this house that is in view of this natural phenomenon, the Bass Rock in Scotland, to housekeep, basically to house sit. She doesn't actually sort through Ruth's things. Ruth has passed away by this time. What this book is about is men's violence towards women and children. Okay, that is the main topic of this book. It feels like all of the characters are vehicles through which to talk about this issue. There's a lot of layers to it, again, that I listened to in someone else's review. I will put that review down below because I did find it helped me in some ways to understand this book better. Apparently there's lots of connections between the three time periods through more subtle things. And I would say that for me, the reason that this book didn't quite work for me is because it was too subtle. I struggled I didn't connect all these things, these metaphorical connections that someone who's maybe more researched, has more historical context, or who is looking for those signs of connection would see. I just didn't understand them when I was reading them. I did understand there are some connections that she made that I felt I did pick up on. One of them being this ghost, and I think the overall feeling here is that the house itself is full of ghosts that are the ghosts of women who have been violated in this house and in this area of Scotland. the vignettes themselves, at first you think they're relating to one of the characters, and then you realize they are not relating specifically to one of the three characters you're following. I think that it's so important to talk about violence against women and violence against children perpetuated by men. I don't know if this is the right way for me. For me personally, it's not as effective as, say, a book like The Break by Katharina Vermette, because there's no levity in this book. Near the end, she started to give a bit of levity, a bit of agency, showing that over the course of these three time periods for these three women, their agency increased, their ability to form bonds and fight back essentially through those bonds increases. But ultimately, I felt like the story was so bleak and very difficult to read and very difficult to endure a constant violent examination every time without any sort of break. And I also, again, the subtleties in some of the storytelling for me was just too much. I didn't get all the things. There was a lot of unanswered questions in this book. If you're looking for a book that ties up things well, I wouldn't say this is your best bet. You have to infer a lot of things. You have to, and it's also a lot about gaslighting and about the way that men gaslight women. And I think that is again a super important topic. It's super important to understand how powerful men used to be in literally destroying women's lives, like in literally having them committed to an insane asylum when they question you or when they question your authority, things like that. Like, this is all talked about in here. Actually, if you're watching, Gemma, I really thought you would like this, because if you like Magma by Thora, I'll put her name here, this is the same style of book, okay? It's got the bleakness, it goes bleak, it goes deep, it goes, it pushes you down there and asks you to stay down there in the bleakness. And it doesn't remove anything about how important I think this book is and about the issues that Evie Wyld is bringing to the fore in this book. But I don't think most readers are going to be able to endure this for this amount of time. 340 pages of the repeated, of the threat, of the fear, of the wariness around these men who feel very volatile and feel like they could go off at any moment, and you really don't know what they're going to do or how they're going to react to things. And again, like, psychologically, I totally understand putting people in that state. But, am I the right person to put in that state? Being someone that is already aware of some of this, I'm not sure. Especially if you've endured violence against yourself perpetuated by a man, or sexual or physical or psychological. I don't know if you'll enjoy going through this book, because, you won't enjoy it, but I don't know if you'd want to endure going through this book, because it's very triggering. It was triggering to me, and I can say that out of pure luck, I have not experienced the extent of most of what these women experience in this book. And it was challenging for me, because I kept wanting to find a good man in this story, and there weren't very many, and it was hard to latch on to any of them and say, no, but he's okay. Like, he's not going to do that to you, that type of thing. So yeah, really complex feelings. I totally get why this book is important. But again, and the other thing about the gothicness of it, because a lot of people talk about how gothic it is, the house is atmospheric. There is the atmosphere of the place as well, but I could have done with more of that. She could have taken me further into that kind of, gothic, creepy stuff. I didn't feel like that was very prominent in the story. It was much more about these vignettes of people. And it's also like I needed more time with a lot of the characters in here. I felt like Sarah's story was too brief for me. I felt like there needed to be a bit more in there for Sarah to like do her justice as a character. And I felt like it was predictable what was going to happen as well in that part of the story. And that was kind of disappointing to me because I wanted something more than what I thought forebodingly was going to happen. So yeah, I don't want to talk anymore. I know I already talked for like almost 11 minutes about it, but if you've read it, if you have opinions, I'd love to hear them below. But yeah, this was a little rough. It was a little rough, and I'm glad it's over, and I am glad I read it, but I don't think it would ever be a book that I would return to, or even that I would recommend, because I think that something like this, you should walk into this book with your eyes wide open as to what your next 350 pages are going to be taking you through. So if you like the kind of dire, bleak books, this is a good one to put on your list. And so that is all my reading for January. Thank you so much for joining me to hear about these books. And if you would like to hear more about other books I'm reading, please consider subscribing. And I will be back again soon with another video. Thank you so much for watching.